Okay, you are welcome. Good evening, ma. And I think this is time for PED 130. PED 130. Let me quickly launch the material. I think I'll need to open that manually. Okay, PED 130. That is Introduction to Social Studies. Introduction to Social Studies. We have done quite a lot in this course. We have talked about the meaning of social studies. We have talked about what social study is and what it is not. We have also talked about the historical background of social studies, different thoughts in United States, in Britain, and then we are to talk about the thoughts in Africa. Oh, I think we've done for Africa in the last class. We are to start from what is it called? The historical background. I think we are meant to start from. Oh, sorry. Yes, I haven't shared my screen. Sorry, I was trying to launch the. So meant to start from that of Africa because we have done the thought in United States. I still remember that very well. We have done the thought in Britain too, and we are supposed to start from Africa when we stopped in the last class. So today we start from Africa and we also talk about in Nigeria. We talk about it in Africa and in Nigeria. Oh, I think this is very tiny, but taking it like that is also too big. Okay, I think it's okay like this. So development of social studies thoughts in Africa. When we're talking about that of the United States in the last class and that of Britain, we had some similarities. In fact, that of Britain was very funny. That was where they were talking about making children to believe that yes, they should honor the queen, and also that police are not your friend. Police are something like that. So, in fact, if I do not remember anything in that class, I remember that one. And when we're talking about it in the United States, we said because of the effect of the war, the post-war dilemma, then it allowed most of them to embrace social study because initially they were totally against it. In fact, in Britain, the school of thought of history and geography, I still remember those things are still fresh in my head. Now, those of history and biology, and geography, they were totally against it. In fact, they raised an opposition, but at the end, when they saw the need because of the effect of the war, uh, uh, they had to embrace it. So today, we now want to talk about it in our own Africa. Discussion on social studies or social studies taught in the United States of America and Britain without Africa as a continent may be seen as incomplete exercise because social studies growth and development has been a universal phenomenon. It has been a universal phenomenon according to Lawal and Oyeleye in 2003. Now, a close look at the development of historical thought of social studies in the United States and Britain we review that it has had a great influence on social studies thought in Africa. I will take that again so that we understand what we're trying to say there. A close look at the development of historical thought of social studies in the US and Britain, we reviewed that it has had a great influence on social studies thought in Africa, according to Lawal in 2003. What they're trying to say is that if we study the 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 thought or the development of social study in US and in Britain very closely, we discover that that their own development had great influence on Africans too. Now, let's read further, maybe we'll understand better. Now, social studies in Africa is a fairly recent curriculum innovation coming after 1960. In the wake of independence in Nigeria, now during this period, most African countries were European values. This is people of those days, they are more European in thinking, in nature, than African, which they are. Now, which had already been included in the curricula for African schools. They've included their own European values in African curriculums because they are the one that colonized us. They were the one in. Now, the educational policies of the colonial government were formulated to serve the needs of the colonial masters, which means whatsoever it was largely to the advantage of the colonial masters. They did not do anything for the benefit of Africa then. Anything done was basically for the advantage of their own businesses, colonial masters. Now, teaching was geared towards training Africans who would be able to serve the interests of the colonial government. Africa indigenous values, attitude, and skills were totally neglected. They don't want to know if we have any values or we have any skills or anything that is unique to us. Now, you will see that the development of social study in Africa seems to be something that probably erupted after independence, not before independence, because before independence, we were totally submissive to the colonial masters. So we're adopting the European curriculum. However, colonial education had some aspect of social studies. These were in form of general knowledge, religion, and moral instruction. These were taught as civics and government. In that time, social study was taught as civic, government, history, geography, and government as mentioned before. They were considered paramount teaching school subjects during the colonial period to achieve the goals and objectives. Now, good children upbringing was emphasized by colonial masters as a tool, making them submissive to the colonial rule. You see that in any case, all they were doing there was to their own advantage. Now, let's go on Africa. Now, at the attainment of independence by some African countries in 1960, which Nigeria is one of them, colonial education came under very severe attack by the same colonial educated Africans. In fact, this is amazing. The same people they were training to use them to their own advantage, they were training them as prey under them. After independence, it was those same people that used their knowledge to fight their own curriculum that was mainly to inculcate the colonial. Well, even to today, we Africans, we still want to be like like the Europeans. So it seems that thing has not left our brain completely. It's a long time thing. The effect is still long impressed on us. Now, the British system of education was described as one geared towards separating the Nigerian child from his or her cultural values instead of developing positive values in him or her. Therefore, the most important areas which were of greater concern to both the leaders and the generality of Africans were the educational systems and curriculum development, which we fit into our own culture, not like we are now being subjected to one curriculum that was brought from some cultures that is not even ours. What happened by 1967. By 1967, more concrete international concern was shown in the development of social studies taught in Africa, especially as a thing of continental concern. So, at an international conference held at Queen's College in Oxford, that is United Kingdom, the introduction of social studies as a formal school subject was proposed, and this conference led to the important and historic 1968 Mombasa Conference held in Kenya. 1968 Mombasa Conference held in Kenya. You need to put that in mind, that the Mombasa Conference in Kenya happened in 1968. Those are questions for TAB or exams. Now, the Mombasa Conference was sponsored by Educational Development Center, EDC. Educational Development Center, EDC, Newton, United States of America, and Center of Curriculum Renewal in Educational Development Overseas, CREDO. CREDO stands for Center of Curriculum Renewal in Educational Development Overseas, CREDO, and that one is located in London. They laid the foundation for an understanding of the meaning of social studies and an application of social studies in Africa. So EDC and CREDO laid the foundation for the understanding and application of social studies study in Nigeria. Oh, sorry, not in Africa. Now we are not in Nigeria narrowly. Now we're still talking of Africa. Now, the conference deliberated on the issues surrounding the development of a new social studies curriculum for the different countries of Africa. Now, this is history, so it's going to be more of reading stories. More of reading story. The course is based on some of the thoughts which the conference focused on included the philosophy of social studies, problem of teacher training, materials development and acquisition, as well as evaluation techniques. Now, let's move on. There were representatives from 11 African countries during that conference. And those countries are Nigeria, Ethiopia, Ghana, Kenya, Lesotho, Malawi, Sierra Leone, Tanzania, Uganda, and Zambia. Those were the African countries that represented Africa in that conference. The major decision reached was that new curricula for social studies for Africa or for schools in Africa, starting with the primary schools, must be developed. So in each country's representative in consultation with the permission of our government was to set up a social studies committee to consider formulating content and developing materials for social studies in her country. After they've arrived at an agreement in the conference, then they left each country with the responsibility of, implementing that agreement, the end result of that conference in each person's country. So each country is to collide with the government of the country to make sure that that agreement was utilized and something reasonable is started on social studies. The conference also set in motion the creation, a year later, of a permanent African International Secretariat based in Nairobi, Kenya, called African Social Studies Program, ASSP. ASSP is located in Nairobi, Kenya. That is the the capital of Kenya. And the full meaning is African Social Studies Program, which was later renamed. It was later renamed to African Social and Environmental Studies Program, ASESP. So ASSP eventually became ASESP. They added environmental, African Social and Environmental Studies Program. Now, the organization was charged with the responsibility of coordinating further development of social studies in Africa. That is the main reason why they formulated that organization to, do more research on coordinating development of social study in Africa continent. Now, hence, it advocates an integrated approach to the teaching of social studies, and it has greatly influenced future thoughts about the subject. Such thoughts have included cultivation of national aspirations, love of one's country, and responsible citizenship. This is history. It may be a very boring class. I really don't like history too. It's always boring, but it's always good we learn from history too. So let's see what more we have to read on Africa. African countries embrace these thoughts. Sorry, that embrace this thought have been developing other thoughts in the discipline, depending on the nature of their national problems. For instance, with the end of the civil war in Nigeria and the complementary problems of such war, social studies has been seen as capable of playing a unique role in giving the new breed of Nigerians firm-based in national consciousness and integration. To crown it all, the new trend in the development of African social studies is the provision of opportunities for looking into the future while taking into consideration the global issues which involve international relations among nations of the world. Now, for example, on that matter, African social studies has recognized the need to pay careful attention to the promotion of democratic and technological value in order to be able to move along with change in the political, economic, and technological system of many countries of the world. Now, from this material, this course, it seems something is shifting in knowledge and idea. You know, basically before you may be thinking of social studies as just a study of social norms and behavior. But now you can see that social studies seems to be playing more national role than just behavior and social norms. In fact, it wasn't even created basically for behavior and social, because from this thing we are seeing now, why many countries adopted social studies is now far beyond just social norms and behavior. They saw the need to integrate that subject. Because before now, if you'd have asked me, I would just say that social studies is just about social life and everything. But now we're even saying something deeper. We are saying that government are using it as a tool to have a better society. Let's see how it affects our country, Nigeria. We've done enough on Africa. 11 African countries that attended the Mombasa conference, came up, agreed, started social studies policy in each of their country, and so on and so forth. But what of our own motherland, Nigeria? Development of social studies taught in Nigeria. After we've read about Nigeria, I think that is where we'll likely stop this class. I'm already getting bored of these their stories and histories. I don't like anything that is just history. No touch of science. Now, discussion on development generally in various countries of the world may have little or no significant meaning without particular reference to Nigeria, the most populous black race country in African continent and the whole world. So Nigeria, we have the largest population in Africa. Social studies as an integrated discipline was not in existence during the colonial era in Nigeria. That means before 1960. What was found, so you should note that the colonial, now the way they ask question in exam, or even hear me. Now, this statement now is what a question. They will give you the full statement and ask you the year that the colonial area lasted. The year that the colonial era lasted. It lasted 1840 to 1960. Anything before 1960, colonial era. So what was found in the primary and post-primary schools in the country then was the teaching of a kind of curriculum called general knowledge, according to Udo in 1989. Of course, the Nigerian child was therefore being educated outside his or her own environment, his or her own society and culture. It was more appropriate at that time to know and explain concepts from European examples. In fact, I think I still remember, at least me, I'm almost 30 or I'm already 37. I still remember when we were in primary school then. They used to teach us something called current affairs. It's just all about news, stories. That is all we knew then. Current affairs, current affairs. That is what they're trying to make reference to. They teach you general knowledge, of which a larger percentage of that general knowledge is European matters, not even Nigerian culture. Or development of social studies in Nigeria, however, came earlier than those of other countries in Africa. This was because 1958, the Ohio State University in the United States of America had sponsored some Nigerians for training programs in social studies. The arrival of the recipient of such training programs greatly influenced thoughts about social studies. So, Ohio University in America gave some free tickets to some people to come study social studies. When they finished their studies and they came back to Nigeria, they already understood what social studies could do. It's not just about studying about social norms or anything. So they brought back those great lessons they've learned from that university to help us create a better environment for us here. Now, for instance, they perceived the social ills that accompany Nigeria's transition from colonial area to independence. What we're trying to say about social ills is that those are like wounds, social wounds that we sustained from the fight for independence. They also discovered the high rate of acculturation, the high rate of acculturation among Nigerians, and the rate at which the nation's cultural traditions were breaking down. They therefore felt that the only way to salvage the country was to train the young ones in the manner that will provide them with opportunities to catch up with of change, new problem of change. Now, the history in Nigeria seems to be more interesting. Or maybe it's because I'm a Nigerian. Because this one seems to be something we can relate to than all the one we have been reading about before. All those ones just want to blow somebody's head. But this Nigeria's one seems to be more interesting. But they mentioned something there which I think we need to talk about. They said they discovered the high rate of acculturation among Nigerians. What is the meaning of acculturation? I think it's worth knowing. So we don't just be reading and we read and go. What that means is that is I think acculturation is actually learning or trying to adopt another person's culture without totally abandoning your own. You understand? You are trying to learn another person's culture without totally abandoning your own. So that is the simple way I can define that and what it is doing in that context. So this pattern of social studies thought was also complemented with an earlier effort at introducing the subject on an experimental basis in the Nigeria or northern Nigerian teacher training institutions as a formal school subject. However, between 1964 and 1965, social studies had been introduced into Nigeria through the Northern Education Project and the Ayetoro Comprehensive High School Project of Western Nigeria. So during this same period, the the then Western Nigerian Ministry of Education began preparation for the propagation of the subject by convening a conference and agreeing to an outline of the social studies. Agreeing to an outline of the social studies. It's just story and story and story. Ah, I'm already getting bored. Jesus. Okay, let's move on. So we now say syllabus. Syllabus for secondary schools, class 1 and 2. This was later assigned to the Department of Social Studies in Ayetoro Comprehensive High School with the assistance of the Ford Foundation Aid and Comparative Education Study and Adaptation Center, the CSAC. Comparative Education Study and Adaptation Center, CSAC. CESAC. Now, the experimental teaching of social studies did not experience a total success in the eastern Nigeria due to the civil war. So the Northern State Education Committee of the Interim Common Services Agency, after the creation of 6 states from the existing Northern states, however, made a decision that social studies should be introduced into schools and colleges in the Northern states. So by 1969, Social Studies Department was firmly established in the Institute of Education, especially in Ahmadu Bello University in Zaria. Ahmadu Bello University in Zaria. That is 1969. So in that same year, or in that very year, a national curriculum conference was held where in Lagos, and this gave a better national recognition to the subject as a means of achieving national objectives of education. Now, in 1970, just a year after, 1970 witnessed another tremendous position change. Tremendous position change in social studies as materials produced for primary and teachers college or colleges in the northern state were out, and the CSAT book were modified and refined. Now, more states such as Lagos, Kwara, and Kaduna began to introduce the subject in 1971. In fact, even in Nigeria, it suffered a bit before it was later solidified. Representatives from the Eastern Central State Ministry of Education also attended Social Studies Association of Nigeria, SOSAN. This abbreviation is very important. Social Studies Association of Nigeria, SOSAN. The conference happened in 1971 with the full support of the teaching and learning of the subject. You know, the main thing I think we have been able to see there is that when they brought the social study when the concept started in Nigeria, it's well, the western and the northern part of the country, they seem to embrace it, and they started it as early as 1964. So, but for the eastern part, I think that is the Igbo side, because of the civil war that was ongoing in that place then, they were able to embrace it early. They were the last part of the country to embrace social studies. So let's move on with the first national curriculum workshop held in Ibadan under the sponsorship of Nigeria Education Research Council, NETC. The first ever national social studies syllabus for primary schools was produced in Ibadan. Wonderful. So, concepts, nature, objectives, teaching strategies, teaching aids, evaluation techniques were all discussed at the conference. Now, based on the necessity for training of pre-service social studies teachers in primary schools, the Nigeria Education Research Council, the NETC, produced syllabus for teachers colleges in 1972, and the Institute of Education in ABU Zaria introduced the subject into the postgraduate diploma in education, PGD, education, that is program. Now, in the same year, a degree course in social studies in Ahmadu Bello University Zaria and Nigerian Certificate in Education (NCE) program in Advanced Teachers College Sokoto was introduced in 1973. In fact, it flourished so well in the north. Let's just say it like that in form of conclusion. When social studies first appeared in Nigeria, it flourished so well in the north. The western part of the country too, they are not so bad, but it flourished most in the north. The ones that seem not to even embrace it at all, that where it was so lacking, was in the east. Now, in 1974 and 1975, there was another development at the Institute of Education. Now, the Institute of Education, University of Lagos, they were the subject. Sorry, I think something is missing. Where the subject, where the subject was introduced at okay, associateship and NCE levels. Like for, I think for associateship, you are talking about professors, and NCE levels. 1976 was another year when universal free primary education was launched through the country, and the teaching of social studies in the primary schools replaced separate subject of the social sciences. It became compulsory in teachers' colleges. So we are trying to see, in fact, more of what we are seeing in the history in Nigeria is more of developmental stages. It's developed stage by stage by stage by stage. That's what we are seeing here. It's not really more of deep history like that. Now, in 1978, we said we have a 2-year Bachelor of Education (PEDU) degree programs in social studies introduced in ABU Zaria. So it now became a course you can even study in the university as far back as 1978. So ABU Zaria seems to really play a very key role in the development of social study in Nigeria. ABU Zaria played a very vital role in the development of social studies in Nigeria. So by 1980, the discipline of social studies was offered at all levels of educational system, and the national policy on education made it a core subject in primary and junior secondary schools. Now, in 1981, the NETC, now Nigerian Educational Research and Development Council, NETC, thought it wise to review the National Primary Social Studies Curriculum Guide, which was produced in 1971. Now, the revised guide was published by the Federal Ministry of Education in 1983. In 1983. But there is something else we haven't talked about. In 1981 and 1984, those 2 years witnessed rapid development because many more universities started postgraduate degree programs in social studies. It's no longer just Sokoto and ABU Zaria. Other universities joined. Typical examples of such institutions include Ife, Ibadan, Ilorin, Lagos, Nsukka, and Jos. So the Joint Consultative Committee (JCC) also approved the junior secondary school social studies syllabus in that same year. Now, according to Odo in 1989. So we are almost done with the history or the developmental stages of social studies in Nigeria. This is the last part, and I think, yes, Social Studies Association of Nigeria, SOSAN. Now let's see this. The National Teachers Institute did not only produce the Grade 2 Social Studies syllabus and text, it also went ahead to write course books on social studies for NCE and NCE for distance learning system, the distribution of which started in 1990. Almost all colleges of education now offer social studies in their current programs. Degree and postgraduate program in social studies are now being offered in more than 10 universities in Nigeria. The skepticism on the nature, scope, and philosophy of social studies has been over to some extent. Has been over to some extent. Okay, so it is now a compulsory subject in the first 9 years of a Nigerian child's education courtesy of the new 9-year basic education curriculum launched in 2007. We studied about that 9-year basic curriculum in one of your courses last week. So, this brings us to the end of history. Thank God. We've come to the end of history of social studies, both in the USA, in Britain, in Africa, and in Nigeria as a country. And we learned unique points in each of those places. There was a unique experience in USA, a unique experience in Britain, a unique experience in Africa generally, and even a unique experience in Nigeria. And like you've learned, one unique thing to learn about this history is that, or these histories, is that each of them, they had some challenges that led to them wanting to adopt social studies. Those that it wasn't war, it was because of acculturation. Like in Nigeria now, our own is not totally because of war. We felt that we have been deprived our own culture because what we had then was the colonial masters curriculum. Which did not talk about our culture at all. So that was the reason why Nigeria had to fight for their own social studies curriculum. So for each country, there seems to be different reasons that prompted them to embrace social studies. So I think I need to work a lot tomorrow or maybe on Wednesday that you will not have class in trying to upload the rest of your assignments. So this is we have self-assessment and a lot of them. So they say the mother country of social studies, I think that should be America. So these are things they will likely test you on an exam. So on your own personal study, or doing your own personal study rather, try to answer each of these self-assessment. Look at the question, go back to the reading and check where it was. They say list some of the benefits of the Mombasa Conference on the growth of social studies in Africa. In fact, it was as a result of that conference that they came up with an acceptable policy for each country to commence something on social studies. So I've answered that. They said that first question, the mother country of social study, United States of America, of course, that was the first thing we talk about. That was why America was the first one we studied. They serve as the mother of social study. So in fact, the answers are also here. Both the questions and the answers, they are all written here. Now, as a form of conclusion, let's read the conclusion. It will help us to see some other things. Let me just bring it back a bit. The growth of social studies across different parts of the world has been informed by a variety of reasons and factors, like I've mentioned too, that there's different reasons why different countries adopted social studies. For instance, it has been used as a partial solution for social problems in many countries of the world. In Germany, it was initiated after the Second World War as a means of developing a new political order. In Britain, social studies was used to legitimize the teaching of social sciences, particularly sociology, while preparing students for their role in the society. By the Butler Act of 1944, Britain eventually looked up to integrated social studies program as an avenue for promoting in our youth the social cultural values which Britain tradition has held in esteem for a long time. In the United States of America, USA, social studies has continued its primary function of preparing students for effective citizenship in democratic society and instilling patriotic ideas in young ones, according to Kisok in 1981. Among the African nations, social studies has been used to improve the self-image of people in its society after a colonial rule and heritage. In Sierra Leone, it was used to learn ways of improving the economy. In Ghana, it was aimed at transforming the society, especially political culture. In Ethiopia, it came to inculcate the concept of nationalism, unity and interdependency among citizenry of a new nation with diverse population. While in our own almighty Nigeria, in Nigeria, it is aimed at helping to build a foundation for a democratic society. Now, in spite of many conferences, seminars, and workshops for social studies, the subject did not receive the blessing of so many schools in Nigeria immediately, like we've read earlier. Some were scared because of its newness or lack of understanding of its nature, the scope, the dynamism. Others saw the development as a great challenge to their discipline and therefore campaigned against it. This necessitated the formation of Social Studies Association of Nigeria (SOSAN). Several other organizations have since been formed to further promote effective teaching of the subject in Nigerian schools. These organizations include National Association of Social Studies Educationists (NASSE), NASSE, National Association of Social Studies Educationists, and Social Studies Teachers Association of Nigeria (SOSTAN). Social Studies Teachers Association of Nigeria. And then I think we can conclude. Okay, that is conclusion. In summary of this whole unit of history. In this unit, you have interacted with the various thoughts that influenced the development and growth of social studies as a discipline of study in schools in different parts of the world, with specific references to the United States, Britain, Africa, Nigeria in particular. The various factors that influence such growth and development have been highlighted. Chief of these factors were effect of wars on the content of nations' educational system, the need to use curriculum content to emphasize and promote national and cultural values, and build a firm base in citizens on issues of national consciousness and integration. This summary has covered everything that we'll be reading about since. Now, we also talk about the role which the development of social studies in Africa played on growth in Nigeria has equally been discussed with a remark that the development of the subject in Nigeria came earlier than those of other countries. Now, basically, the earliest recipients were the Americans. And ever since its development in the United States of America, USA, this has been instrumental to the development of the subject in other parts of the world. In a form of summary, the mother country of social study is the United States of America. So, we have come to the end of the history of social study, the historical thoughts of social study, the thought in the United States of America, the thought in Britain, the thought in Africa, and the thought in Nigeria. You can see basic reasons why most of these people or most of these countries adopted or embraced social studies, even though it faced a lot of challenges in most of those countries before they eventually adopt it. But due to one reason or the other, several reasons like the effect of war, the need for nationalism, the need for sense of patriotism in the citizens, and so on and so forth, it made most of the countries to eventually agree to adopt it. In Britain, for example, historians and geographers were the major challenge that the subject had then because they were against it. So this brings us to the end of the class today. In our next class, we will go to Unit 3, which is philosophical background of social studies in Nigeria. We are now moving back to Nigeria and we want to dwell more now is no longer historical thought, it's now philosophy, the philosophy of social studies in Nigeria. And that brings us to the end of the class. Do enjoy the rest of your Sunday. See you tomorrow.